Welcome to this presentation on modern liberalism. In this presentation, we will cover 5 aspects of modern liberalism: equal opportunity as a positive right, government intervention, the freedom dilemma, reasonableness, and progress. So the background to modern liberalism has its roots in the late 19th century and the progressive movement of the early 20th century, at a time when America was industrializing and workers were beginning to experience very difficult work conditions, low wages, long hours, and this kind of led us into a conversation about a new sort of political thinking to address some of the problems and the inequities of that period. In many ways, modern liberalism is an extension of classical liberalism that we've talked about earlier. Certainly, modern liberals would believe in natural rights and environmental influences on human behavior, and of course, in the potential for human progress as classical liberals believe in. They also, though, modern liberals would diverge from classical liberalism on several very important points. Uh, Modern liberals would go from economic freedom to a position on government intervention. They would go from negative rights to what we call positive rights, which we will explain in just a minute. And they are going to go from the idea of self-evident truth to moral relativism. So some really significant divergence from classical liberalism among modern liberals. So some of the important thinkers of modern liberalism: Lester Frank Ward, William James, John Dewey, Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr., John Maynard Keynes, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, Isaiah Berlin, John Rawls, and Barack Obama. Modern liberals have a very important viewpoint on the concept of equal opportunity as a positive right. So we want to break that down and understand the difference between negative rights and positive rights. So classical liberals would argue for what we call negative rights, the right not to be obstructed in something. So, for example, classical liberals would see equal opportunity as a negative right. You have a right not to be obstructed in equal opportunities for advancement. And so, therefore, the government, according to classical liberals, must not obstruct a person's freedom to pursue equal opportunities. That's looking at equal opportunity as a negative right. Modern liberals are going to look at equal opportunity as a positive right. Positive rights are the right to do or have a specific thing. So if equality of opportunity is a positive right, then government must provide citizens with equal opportunities. And notice that is a very, very big difference between the classical liberal view that government shouldn't obstruct a person's freedom to pursue equal opportunities to the modern liberal view that government must provide citizens with equal opportunities. So how does that work its way out? Well, equal opportunity as a positive right works its way out in the form of government intervention. Uh, Positive rights inevitably lead to significant government intervention. So, for example, modern liberals would support things like health care uh, or health insurance. They would support providing food to low income families, providing housing to people, providing education, setting minimum wage laws, all sorts of other things that government would do. The government would intervene in our society to provide people with specific equal opportunities, again, as a positive right. So government, in their view with regard to the economy, They're going to abandon the free market concepts of classical liberals and begin arguing for government regulation of privately owned business and industry. Now, notice they don't go as far as the socialists do, arguing that government should own the means of production, but they do kind of go halfway towards that in allowing government to regulate privately owned business and industry. So government intervention, a really big part of modern liberalism and a very significant departure from classical liberalism. So these things that we've talked about so far kind of create for modern liberals a freedom dilemma, what we call the freedom dilemma. So modern liberals believe equal opportunity is a positive right. And as a result, they believe that government needs to intervene to provide people with equal opportunities. But they also believe that government should protect individual freedom. That's a very important element of modern liberalism. And as you can imagine, that is complicated. Uh, Protecting individual freedom is going to be complicated um, when you consider that government is going to be intervening to provide people with equal opportunities. And that's because using government force to secure equal opportunity for one person or group has the inevitable result of infringing on the personal freedoms of another person or group. An example of that would be using income tax money to provide housing for low income families. When you have a progressive income tax, as we do, which taxes wealthy people at a higher rate than other people in society, and when a lot of people in our society don't even make enough money to pay an income tax, you are taking income or wealth from one group of people, and you're providing a service with that money to another group of people. And as a result of that, you are providing equal opportunities. Government is intervening to provide equal opportunities for housing, for example, to one group of people. But at the same time, it is taking away the property of another group of people, which infringes on their freedom to keep their property and do with their property as they wish. And so the difficulty of modern liberalism is trying to reconcile these two things: equal opportunity as a positive right and protecting individual freedom. That is what we call the freedom dilemma. Modern liberals also embrace the concept of reasonableness. Modern liberals argue that the pursuit of truth is, on a practical level, impossible. Um, and that's an important divergence from conservatism, who obviously are going to believe in a transcendent morality, that there's certain absolute truths. You pursue them, you try to figure them out. And even classical liberals who argue that if we just work hard enough and use our reason, we can get to these fundamental laws of nature, understand the way things are supposed to operate. Well, modern liberals diverge from that kind of thinking, and argue instead for what John Rawls called reasonableness. John Rawls said only one moral claim can be true, but several moral claims can be reasonable. And so he argued that instead of trying to find that one moral claim that we probably never will get everyone to agree to, that we should choose the best of these several reasonable moral claims that are out there. And so this is the essence of reasonableness, and it is the genesis of what we call moral relativism. Instead of saying, well, we're going to look for that one moral truth, we're going to say that morality is now relative. There are several reasonable paths to pursue, and we are going to pick the best of those paths, but not claim that they are the only moral truth or the sole moral truth. And so this is going to work its way out um, with regard to modern liberalism in what we call the living constitution. The idea that the Constitution must be adjusted to new circumstances by a liberal or broad interpretation of its provisions. So we're going to have a sort of a growing and adjusting view of our Constitution and its provisions. And we're going to accept the idea that the Constitution is alive. It's not stagnant. It's not one set of things that we have to follow exactly as it was stated several hundred years ago. We have to put it into the context of our modern society. So there's a lot of room within modern liberalism for expansion and for adjustment and for experimentation as a result of this concept of reasonableness. So when you put these concepts together, you get this next aspect of modern liberalism, which is the concept of progress. So modern liberals are optimistic realists. They're optimists, but they also are realists at the same time. So they will believe that change is good. They accept change and they pursue change. They are okay with political experimentation. They are okay with trying several different scenarios to try to find out what works. Franklin Roosevelt did this famously in his New Deal of the 1930s to combat the Great Depression. He tried just about every idea that anybody had ever thought up to try to deal with that particular problem. And so modern liberals, they kind of think that way. And they believe, therefore, in the possibility of progress, both in human beings and in human institutions. Remember, they believe in the importance of environmental influences, and that if you adjust the environment, you'll get a better result. You create a better environment, you get a better result. So they believe in the possibility of progress in human beings and in human institutions. But remember, they are also realists. They are not utopians. They are not socialists. They recognize, modern liberals recognize that differing human ideas of morality will always cause some level of social conflict. They don't think that you can create a perfect society. They don't think that you can remove social conflict completely, but they do have a very positive, very optimistic idea of progress, of the potential of progress in human beings and human institutions. Bertrand Russell, in his last philosophical testament, really did a great job of summarizing modern liberalism. He said, quote, "The essence of the liberal outlook lies not in what opinions are held, but in how they are held. Instead of being held dogmatically, they are held tentatively, and with the consciousness that new evidence may at any moment lead to their abandonment." So here you see these principles of reasonableness, of moral relativism, of progress, of political experimentation, kind of coming out in what Bertrand Russell is trying to put forward as the modern liberal idea. So these are four paintings by Norman Rockwell that come out of the famous speech that Franklin Roosevelt made as our president on what he called the four freedoms. And these pictures associate those four freedoms. You have the freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom from want, and freedom from fear. And the imagery here is really strong, and it's a very, very powerful modern liberal concept that people should have freedom of speech and freedom of religion, but they also should have freedom from want. They should also have the opportunity to have their basic needs provided and also freedom from fear. And again, as we talk about modern liberalism and understanding the idea of positive rights, those last two are positive rights. People have to make sure other people are provided for appropriately. We have to make sure people do not live in fear. And so you get that sense of the government intervening to provide things for people, which is a good way to understand and interpret modern liberalism. So in this presentation, we have looked at five aspects of modern liberalism. Equal opportunity as a positive right, something that needs to be provided to people. The government intervention to provide equal opportunity, the dilemma that this creates with regard to freedom, which is also an important concept for modern liberals, reasonableness and moral relativism that comes out of the concept of reasonableness, and the belief in progress. Modern liberalism, a very optimistic and a very important viewpoint, dating back about 120 to 130 years now, that is extremely important in our modern political conversation. Some things to think about with regard to modern liberalism. What are the strengths of modern liberalism? What are the weaknesses of modern liberalism? And are you a modern liberal? Why or why not?